Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining Next Up. I am your host, Mark Halperin, editor-in-chief of the live interactive video platform Two Way, and your guide, as always, to everything that is coming next up. Joining me in just a bit, one of my all-time favorite people, Meghan McCain, my colleague at Two Way. She'll be here. She's very fun to talk to. She knows about politics, celebrities, and best of all, on any topic, Meghan knows what's what. We'll talk about the news and also some relationship issues that I'm dying to hear what Meghan thinks. She's been talking on our own show about the Sydney Sweeney matter, and I plan to hold her account for some of the things she said. Don't miss that. Then later in the program, we're going to talk about the topic that's always on everybody's minds, the U.S. economy. It's super confusing right now. It's a bit of a riddle wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in some bacon. And for that conversation to try to figure out whether the economy is on the rise or dangerously imperiled, we'll be joined by the very brilliant David Bahnsen. David will be here to explain it, and he's the exact person I'd want to talk to about all of that because David understands both economics and politics and what happens at the intersection of the two. So we'll have a conversation about fun stuff, serious stuff, interesting stuff, and two of my favorite people. So stay tuned for that. But first, I now have something first for you exclusively as a premiere for you Nexters, which is my 2028 Invisible Primary Rankings for the Democratic Party as they search for a presidential nominee. Not too soon to talk about it. There's lots of 2028 news swirling about this week. First of all, Kamala Harris' decision to skip running for governor of California, in theory, opens the door for her to run for president. I'm still not sure she will. There's not much enthusiasm amongst people I talk to about her prospects of her running. But had she run for governor and lost, I think that would have shut the door on running for president. And if she'd run for governor and won, also probably shut the door to think that she could turn right around and start a presidential campaign with the rigors of trying to govern a very large state. Seems impossible. So we'll see what happens with her. Politico had a story this week. Their reporter went to a governor's meeting, governors around the country, and talked to a lot of the Democrats about what they're seeing. And Democratic governors, as often happens when the party has screwed up a presidential race, and most Democrats think they screwed up in 2024, is they look to the governors. You want an outsider, you want someone with executive experience, you want someone who understands how to run and fight decisively. And the two governors that people were talking about at that meeting were the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, the governor of Pennsylvania, Governor Shapiro. Those two guys, very accomplished. They have a lot of to recommend them, which we'll talk about in a moment. But they're also well-liked. And part of the game at this phase is to be well-liked. And so people who are what are called the great mentioners will mention you. The person who at that meeting was not particularly well-liked was the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, because he does not play well with his fellow governors, at least not as well as Moore and Shapiro do. As I said, not too early to talk about this because people are gearing up to run. It's an open seat. And you've got a lot of Democrats in their 40s and 50s and 60s who really want to run this time. There's no obvious front runner. And so one of the things that anyone serious about running for president has learned over the last few cycles is run when it's your moment. And the poster child for that amongst Democrats, at least, is Barack Obama. Really, no reason to think he would have run in 2008. Was not, quote unquote, his time or his turn, rather. But he became convinced in talking to some of his fellow senators that it was his time, if not his turn, and ran in a very tough field, not just Hillary Clinton, but John Edwards and Joe Biden and Chris Dodd and Bill Richardson. And he won the nomination. My first campaign that I covered was 1992. I was working in journalism in 88, but in 92, I covered Bill Clinton. And he was not given that great a chance by some people to run. And after he did win, I started to think about, was that something we could predict? Could we predict that he'd be the Democratic nominee based not just on the kind of gauzy way people evaluate presidential candidates, but with a more rigorous style? I'm not good at very much. But here's three things I'm good at. Great at making bacon and pepperoni for my son. Great at outfoxing the Delta frequent flyer program. And I think I'm pretty good, at least, at sizing up presidential candidates in both parties. Today, we're going to talk about the Democrats because I think the Republican side, although it's an open race, is going to be dominated by J.D. Vance. But on the Democratic side, it's super interesting. And what I'm offering you today, classes in session, is a free education for how you should actually think about who's got the best chance to be the nominee. We're not talking about winning a general election today. We're talking about who's going to be nominated by the Democrats. And the way to do that, in my experience, is through something I call the invisible primary rankings. This is super important. And I started in the 2004 cycle. I started in 2002. And it involves thinking about, looking at history and thinking about what are the areas, what are the individual categories that you need to excel in to win the nomination. Now, not all categories are created equal. And someone could be first and someone could be second, and the gap between them could be huge. And things can change over time. But what I do starting now, and I'll do this throughout the cycle here with you, is I look at the categories I think matter most. And then I say, who's ahead? And it's not just who's ahead right now. It's who's got a strong history in that area, who's ahead now, and then project forward a little bit. As I wrote back then, when I started this in 2002 for the 2004 cycle, it's how the candidate's doing currently, what potential they've shown, and based on everything we've seen so far, what are their prospects of excelling in the future? So these numbers, these rankings measure past, present, and future all at once. Now, the interesting thing, when I look back at the first time I did this in 2002, is the categories can change. Some stay the same. Raising money is always important, and yet raising money is different now than it was in 2002. In 2002, for the 2004 cycle, you basically wanted to raise maximum checks, about $1,000 from rich people in big cities. That's where most of the money came from. What are the changes now? Well, of course, online fundraising. If you're not a great online fundraiser, you're unlikely to be a great fundraiser as a candidate. And super PACs play a huge role in presidential campaigns, which they didn't back then. Back then, in my first 2002 ratings of the Democratic Party rankings, the two top finishers in the various categories and the combined scores were John Kerry and John Edwards. They ended up finishing 1-2 in the process and, of course, forming a ticket. So I started off pretty well, and I think this works. Again, things change. In previous cycles, being really strong in Iowa to do well in the caucuses was amongst the most important. And yet now we're not even sure who will vote first in the primary category. So this process is one that has some things that carry over, some things that are very fluid. What I'm going to do for you today is not rank the whole field. We'll get to that eventually, I think. But just tell you who I think is 1 and 2. Number 1, top candidate. Number 2, in what I think are the most important categories. And I'll say again, these things can change over time, but this is my projection of where we'll be. And of course, some of the people I talk about today will almost certainly not run for president in the end. And some of them, some people who might run aren't included here because they're not on my radar right now, or I don't think they will run. But I've included in here people who I think have a decent chance of making the race. And this is an interesting time to do this evaluation because no one's a declared candidate. No one's out there, but there is a lot of activity. You see people traveling to states where they think will be important on the calendar. You see people trying to meet with donors, doing media, developing policy ideas, and of course, trying to define themselves in the news as in juxtaposition to Donald Trump, even though he won't be the Republican candidate in 2028, I don't think. Nonetheless, that's the contest right now to prove to Democrats that you're serious about running. So we'll run through what I consider to be some of the most important factors, and would love to have you think about these ways, these prisms to evaluate. It makes me very frustrated when I hear people say, oh, such and such, so-and-so is such a strong candidate, or I really think this person's going to do well. And I always either ask them explicitly or just think in my thought bubble head, what are you basing that on? It's some sort of amorphous sense that they'll be strong. I prefer the rigor of thinking about the categories that matter most. In presidential politics, regardless of party, there's something called the virtuous cycle. And the virtuous cycle is, if you look at history, the nominee generally dominates the virtuous cycle. What does it involve? It means you try to raise some money by going to people who support you even before you've gotten in the race. And then somebody will write a story about how much money you've raised, an impressive number. And that story will cause you to get more publicity and your poll numbers will go up. And when your poll numbers go up, then you go back to the donors and you say, hey, look at this new poll. Or you email your list of people for grassroots fundraising and say, hey, I've risen from 2% to 6%. Give me more money so we can continue the momentum. They give you more money. You spend that money on on advertising or voter contact of some sort, your poll numbers go up again. You raise more money, you get better press coverage. That virtuous cycle, which is not linear, right? Because sometimes you can raise more money off of the polls or the advertising, regardless of the press coverage. But that virtuous cycle is what all these candidates need to get going. Now, some of them don't even know about it unless they listen to this show or they've thought of it on their own. But that's what's going on right now is they're all trying to get the machinery moving. So let's talk about the factors that I think are most important now and who's doing well. And we start with money. Money is a funny thing in presidential politics because unlike in every other race, House, Senate, governor, money matters less because there's so much what's called earned media, so much press coverage, podcast, TV, et cetera, that you don't need advertising. Voters get a very high percentage of their information, both in the general election and the primary process, from media, not paid ads, but from media. And so the ads matter less. And yet fundraising is extremely important in presidential politics. First of all, you need a minimum amount of money to build a staff, hire people in the states and nationally, and do some advertising. But money to me is most important as a badge to get that virtuous cycle going. So when you think about money, as I said, it's different than it was when I started this in 2002 for the 2004 cycle, and certainly different than 1992. The amounts of money that you need to raise are greater, much greater. Bill Clinton in 1992, his top fundraiser was a guy named Rahm Emanuel. And I think he raised like several $1 million in the beginning of the campaign. And that was considered, miraculous and a sign of Clinton's support. So how do you raise money now? 3 basic buckets. You have to have so-called bundlers. So you call someone who's supporting you in New York or Atlanta and you say, have a fundraiser for me. And they got to call their Rolodex, and everybody in their Rolodex, their contact list has to call somebody else. And you try to raise as much as you can in maximum checks, about $2,000 a check. And maybe you say, have your wife write a check, or your husband, or have your kids write checks if they're over 18. That process, so-called bundling, is a big way to get money. Second way is low dollar contributions on the internet through email, solicitations, texting. That's hugely important. Costs virtually nothing to raise the money. It used to be done through the mail. You had to send people an actual letter with a stamp on it, and then they had to mail you back a check or their credit card information. Now, of course, just a couple of taps on a phone or on the internet. That's an important way to raise money. And if you don't have the capacity to raise grassroots money, it says something about your appeal to the voters, right? About how much enthusiasm there is for you in a broad way. And of course, the other big thing about grassroots fundraising is somebody gives you $100, they can keep giving you $100 every month. You can keep going back to them until they reach that maximum of a couple $1,000s. And then lastly, super PACs. Super PAC spending is not as efficient, but again, it's another sign to folks that you've got broad support, and super PACs can do things like run negative ads. So those are the 3 buckets. And I'd say right now, here are my 2 front runners. And the first one, the person who probably will have the most money is Jay Pritzker if he runs, governor of Illinois. Now, that's not because he's a great fundraiser. It's because he's a billionaire. And if he does run, he'll put in his own money. Now, that's not as good as the grassroots money because it doesn't demonstrate support. And the fact is, when you spend your own money on a campaign, it tends to deter people from giving you money. That's why one of the reasons, besides the fact that he doesn't like to spend money, that Donald Trump was reluctant to self-fund his campaign. Because if you're a student of this, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire and you start to fund the campaign yourself, it's very hard to get people to give money because they say, why should I give a millionaire or a billionaire money when they've got all the money they need? But if Pritzker runs, I think he'll raise some. He has a lot of rich friends. I don't know how good a grassroots fundraiser he'll be, but he'll raise a lot. Rahm Emanuel is number 2 on my list, also from Illinois. First of all, he's one of the best fundraisers in the history of Democratic politics, starting with that Bill Clinton campaign, but raising money for himself, for the DCCC, when he did that for raising money for House candidates. He knows almost every rich Democratic donor in the country, in Hollywood, Silicon Valley, New York, Chicago, of course. So I think he'll be a big bundler. And then his brother, Hollywood super agent Ari Emanuel, I suspect will run a super PAC, help to raise money for a super PAC for that campaign. Now, will he be a good grassroots fundraiser? I don't know, but I know he'll try hard to do that. So those are my top 2 for money. Number 2 in the rankings is the question of the record and the issues. What have you done in office that you can take to the voters and say, here's how I can help you. Here's how I can make your education more affordable, housing more affordable. And the people who tend to do better in this category are governors or former governors because they've run something. They've had their own agendas. Harder to do this if you're a member of Congress, not impossible. So my top two in this category are two guys who are in office now. Josh Shapiro, who's up for re-election in 2026. And in that campaign, we'll get a sense of his abilities in general, but also his ability to sell the Pennsylvania record. What is he going to talk about as he runs for election that speaks to the question of, will he be an effective messenger for the Pennsylvania miracle? That's what most governors who run call their state's performance and their policy positions. And then Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky, Democrat in a red state. Shapiro governs in a purple state. Beshear is term limited, so he's not running for election. And he's got an opportunity to talk to people about what he's done in Kentucky. A lot of interest in his record in Kentucky in the abstract, right? A Democrat who's done well in a state that's moved decisively red at the federal level and most of the state offices. So what was Andy Beshear going to talk about? What's he going to sell? Right now, he's selling more vagaries. What specifics will he talk about? Next category in the rankings, the visible primary here, the primary below the surface, is the story, the bio. What do you say to people? You think about Bill Clinton, the man from Hope. You think about George Bush talking about giving up drinking on his 40th birthday and turning his life around. Barack Obama, grandparents from Kansas, growing up in Hawaii. These stories are important for the American people to get to know you, see you as a three-dimensional person. But they're most effective when you can connect the story of what you've done, how you've lived your life, your bio before you ran for office, with what you've done in elective office. And my top two here are two guys with incredible bios, incredible stories. It helps if your wife is involved too, or your spouse, I should say, to fill out your bio, maybe your kids as well. Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, has a great story. Grew up under challenging circumstances in Maryland, in the military, worked in Robin Hood Foundation, private sector, wrote an incredible book, and then is now in his first elective office, the governor of Maryland. Ro Khanna, congressman from California, originally from Pennsylvania, from a family with great immigrant stories on both his side and his wife's side, and a family that's got mixed political views and who understands the economy from the point of view of both Pennsylvania, which of course is Rust Belt, and Silicon Valley that he represents now. I think both those guys have the ability, not just on paper to have great bios, but they tell their stories well, and they do a great job of integrating their personal histories with what they want to do for the country. All right, the next category is early states. Here I got Wes Moore as number one, Gavin Newsom, California governor, number two. What is it about early states? We don't know what the calendar is. Back in 2002, and in the modern era since President Reagan, the early states were clear. The early states were Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Then, there's been a little bit of mix after that. Super Tuesday got created, but the importance of those first few states is massive. And Joe Biden exploded that a little bit. He moved the calendar around, and then he didn't do well in the early states, but he still became the nominee. Typically, though, you need to win one of the first two, maybe one of the first three at most of the early states to win a nomination. We don't know what the early states will be. So how can I rank Wes Moore 1 and Gavin Newsom 2? I can do it because they are active in the states that they think will be early, particularly South Carolina. And they have the kind of operations that have shown the ability to try to game this out and say, we don't know what will be the early states, but whatever they are, we understand the early state game. What's the early state game? Courting the local political reporters, courting the local federal and state elected officials whose endorsements and political operations will matter, spending time on the ground with grassroots. So watch those two guys as the early state calendar develops and clarifies by the DNC process. Where do they go? And am I right that they're the ones who are going to have the ability to get traction there? All right, next factor, electability. I got Josh Shapiro, number one, and then Gina Raimondo, number two, former governor of Rhode Island and former Commerce Secretary for Joe Biden, very popular with the business wing of the Democratic Party. Why do I put these two, Shapiro 1, Raimondo 2? Because they've got a history of getting elected in general elections, Shapiro in a purple state, Raimondo in a Republican, in a Democratic state, but with a lot of business support. And as I talk to the kind of donors and politicians and some folks in the activist community who care about electability, they're not looking for someone they agree with on every issue. They're not looking for someone who has the ability to tug the heartstrings of the base of the party. They're looking for somebody who can win 270 electoral votes. Shapiro 1, Raimondo 2 are the people whose names I hear the most. Okay, next is the hang test. Who do you want to have a beer with? Or if the candidate doesn't drink, who do you just want to hang on the corner with? Maybe go to Disney World with? Number 1 for hang test, I got Pete Buttigieg. Number 2, Josh Shapiro. These are 2 guys who are not afraid to go on conservative media, whether it's Fox or conservative podcasts. They're likable. They can talk like real people. And the hang test is key. If you look at people who do well in politics, people want to be ability to think about somebody they like. At the same time, they do want the president up on a pedestal a little bit. So I would see, based on what we've observed so far, that Buttigieg and Shapiro are going to be 1 and 2 in knowing how to appeal to people in kind of a personal and human way. All right, the next category, made for TV. Gavin Newsom, number 1, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What's this about? This is just, can you go on different television programs or YouTube programs and do well? Do you handle yourself well? Fun questions, challenging questions, policy questions. Do you come across in that medium as likable? Now, again, TV means different things to different people these days. In this case, it means anything with video, right? Anything where you're going to be interviewed or people are going to be asking you questions or giving a speech, whatever it is. Those are 2, I think, of the top red light performers when the camera's on. All right, next category, commander in chief. President's different than anything else. It's an electability question. Republicans will come hard at any Democrat who doesn't seem qualified to make the tough calls as commander in chief. But also voters in general want somebody who can do that part of the job. It's unlike any other job. Wes Moore and Mark Kelly, 1 and 2. Wes Moore served in the military, as did Mark Kelly. They both understand the customs and policy issues related to national defense. So I make them 1 and 2. And this issue had receded a little bit after the Cold War, when Bill Clinton was able to get elected, even though his commander-in-chief credentials were pretty limited. We're in a different time now. It swung back a little bit because of Putin, because of Iran, because of North Korea. Commander-in-chief matters a lot to voters. Next, media coverage. Who can get good coverage? Number 1, I have Gavin Newsom. Number 2, Ro Khanna, 2 Californians. Both those guys are extremely savvy about how the press works. They talk regularly to reporters offline. They know what shows they want to be on. They know they monitor their coverage closely. They both understand that earned media press coverage across the board. And again, this has changed. In the old days, that was, Washington Post columnists and Des Moines Register news reporters and the major networks and news magazines. Now media coverage spans across lots of platforms, digital platforms, linear platforms, offline, online. Both those guys are very savvy in that area, and both tend to get relatively positive coverage, not uniform, but mostly. All right, next category in the rankings, buzz and momentum. Who understands how to be the it candidate? Who understands how to be considered hot with the capacity to say that person's on a roll? The virtuous cycle is, as much about anything, is about momentum. Gavin Newsom and Wes Moore, number 1, number 2. Right now, both those guys, if you look at the press clippings, if you look at the coverage, both those guys seem very hot, very aware of the need to be seen as the it candidate. And political body in motion tends to remain in motion. And I think because we're at a phase now where people aren't really going after other candidates, even below the radar, at least as far as I see it, they are still in motion. Both of those guys are doing very well, and success begets success. Once you get a good set of coverage, once you have a good fundraising report, once you do something that gets attention, more people want to see you. More reporters want to interview you. More bookers want to book you. More folks want a piece of you. And those guys have done a good job of getting that process going. Okay, this is a category that didn't exist in 2004 when I started this, which is the digital game. It means a lot of things. And number 1, I have AOC. Number 2, Gavin Newsom. It means making your own TikTok videos. It means knowing how to take someone's tweet attacking you and turn it around into something positive. If you ask all these folks and say, what kind of digital game do you have? Or maybe their staff, you got to be on every platform. You can't just have a game on X. You got to have a TikTok game. You got to have an Instagram game. And you have to know what to do to make that your own. The Mamdani in New York running for mayor, he set the standard. But AOC and Gavin Newsom are both extremely savvy. AOC has just owned the digital space ever since she got into politics. It's part of how she got elected originally. And Gavin Newsom wrote a book about this. He understands in this day and age, like, sure, go on Meet the Press. Sure. But that's not what it's about. It's about creating digital content that captures the public imagination. People talk about stuff that goes viral. And of course, they want to go viral, but they also want the capacity to consistently communicate with people. Not viral every time, but consistently use digital to communicate. All right. Couple more categories. Polling and name ID. Extremely important. People don't want to give you money unless they know you are. Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, two Californians. California, of course, our biggest mega state. They're both well known. She was vice president. He's governor and a frequent presence on TV. And that helps a lot. You'd be amazed at how people who've been governor or senator, how hard it is to get well known, particularly in the early states. People may be vaguely familiar with their names, but they don't know anything about them. Now, in the case of some candidates, and Harris and Newsom both have their detractors, name ID isn't necessarily all positive, but that's a key one. And those two, I think, are head and shoulders above the others. And that's partly why they do well in the polls. Okay. Fire in the belly, extremely important. Amy Klobuchar, number one, Pete Buttigieg, number two, both of whom ran in 2020, both of whom did very well and chose to get out of the race in 2020. Even though they were doing quite well, and they might have been able to beat Joe Biden, but Barack Obama and others convinced them to step aside. And this means you really want to be president and you really want to win the nomination. And if you decide to run, and I think in the end they'll both run, would be my hunch. You got to wake up every morning and ask yourself, what are the 10 things I need to do to get elected president? And then you got to do them. You have to burn for it. And I can't tell you the number of presidential candidates in both parties I've covered over the years who they're ambivalent. Their family's not sure about it. They're not sure. They're not sure they can win. You need the eye of the tiger to do this. And both Klobuchar and Buttigieg have that. All right. Lastly is staff and consultants. Candidates matter most, but I don't believe that Bill Clinton would have won necessarily without Carville and Begala, George Bush without Karl Rove. Donald Trump's an exception. He had some good people around him, but he was his own consultant. David Axelrod, David Plouffe with Obama, Barack Obama. Extremely important to be able to hire great people. And a lot of the challenge now in this cycle is so many of the experienced people been there, done that. They're at an age and a point in their careers where they don't want to do it. So you're going to have to find amongst the few people with experience who do want to do another presidential, the best people. And you need a combination of people you've worked with in the past who know you and are loyal to you, but also some new people. And I put Gavin Newsom number one, Rahm Emanuel number two. They both know who the right players are. They both know who to look for, who to hire. And I believe that if they run, they'll be able to have amongst the best consultants out there. All right, that's my first take on the invisible primary rankings. This is going to be something we revisit. I think if you go through that, you'll see there's a way to think about accumulating those results and say, who the front runners are. Just at a glance, you'd say that Newsom and Wes Moore and Shapiro are the top three. And not by coincidence, those are the three who I think are the most likely to be the nominees if they do run. We'll see. Tell me what you think about today's monologue. You can email me at nextuphalperin@gmail.com. You can find this show always on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Go to @nextuphalperin. And of course, watch us on YouTube at youtube.com @nextuphalperin. Listen to us, watch us, whatever you prefer. Next up here, my friend Meghan McCain, right after this. All right, let me ask you this non-musical question. What if you could delay your next two mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those two payments in your pocket and finally getting some breathing room. It's possible when you call American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by those everyday expenses we all deal with, groceries, gas prices, bills piling up on the desk, you are not alone. Most Americans now are putting these expenses on credit cards, and that leaves you with no way out. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off that debt. You need to call American Financing today, though, before you get to the point where you can't make those payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you to restructure their loans and consolidate their debt, all without paying any upfront fees. And their customers are saving an average of $800 a month. That's the equivalent of $10,000 in a raise. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. So call now before it's too late. Dial 866-886-2026. Again, 866-886-2026. Or on the interweb, you can visit americanfinancing.net/next. Next up, let's have some fun. My two-way colleague, Meghan McCain of Citizen McCain, is joining us now. Meghan, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to come back, and I like that you introduced me. Let's have some fun. Yes, let's have some fun.
All right, we're going to start with my favorite topic, which is the most undercovered story in North America. But first, tell everybody when your program's on two-way.
It's on two-way on Mondays and Wednesdays at noon live Eastern, and you can watch it on YouTube anytime you want. And it's really fun. I'm having a great time.
Yes, it's an awesome show. So please watch Meghan's show when she's not here if you want more Meghan, which you do. All right. I have not asked you about this, and perhaps you'll say you don't care, have no opinion, but I'm kind of fascinated by Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau.
I love it.
They seem to have gone on a date. I did not associate them with each other, and I don't know either of them, but I've studied them. I don't get this. So what's your view on whether this is real and if it's sustainable?
So two things. I've met Katy Perry a few times because she used to be like a frequent guest on The View, and we were actually pregnant with our daughters at the same time. So we had like that connection. It was always a thing she wanted to talk about when she came on the show. And the thing about Katy Perry to know about her is her career took a real nosedive when Hillary lost, because she was a huge surrogate for Hillary. She like went to Iowa, went on the road with her, and she has admitted she had a really hard time processing like Hillary's loss and Trump's win. And she like cut all her hair off and started doing like really weird publicity stunts. She did like a almost shaved head when she did it. So the thing I like about this pairing is that Justin Trudeau also had a career slump when Trump won as well. So their careers both peaked in like 2013, 2015, and they're both deeply impacted by Trump, and they're both very progressive. And I think Orlando Bloom, I never thought they were a good pair because I thought Orlando Bloom just wasn't up to the level that she is. And I actually love this pairing. And there's pictures that just came out last night from her concert, and he's looking at her like he's absolutely in love and smitten. So yeah. I'm happy for them.
Yeah, I don't know that building a relationship around Trump derangement syndrome is necessarily something you read about in the fairy tales, but it seems like you're right. They both have the same orientation, and I love cross-border romance, North American romance. Let's just go to brass tacks. Is one of them too good for the other one, or you think like?
No, I think they're perfect.
Pretty matched.
I think it's like perfectly matched. And I also love political and entertainment pairings. I always think that's an interesting, like RFK and Cheryl Hines. I always think it's like an interesting crossover, but I root for Katy Perry. I hope she can make a comeback. She's been a real bad slump the past few years. Has she had new albums? I don't even know. Yeah, and it's really not great. Really bad. And it was like universally panned. I'm not being a hater. And I really like music. It was really bad. And her Vegas concert was like not great. And I've close friends who live in Vegas that were like, it was not good. And she's made a lot of just like really dumb publicity moves, obviously, that into space, taking space. So just hope that maybe this can help her make a comeback. But I think they're going to be a long-term couple. I think they're going to like a couple.
I do too. Like, I know, like at first they were like, oh, we're just friends, we're having dinner. But I looked at those photos from the dinner and the photos from the concert, and I totally agree with you. Like, I normally am skeptical of stuff like this, and like there's so many things that go wrong. I'm like already like maneuvering to get invited to the wedding.
Me too. And he looks like in these photos, like, I can't believe I'm like going out with him. And like, good for him, like, honestly. So I love it. And he's, of course I think of him what you think I think of him, because I'm conservative Republican and he's just like woke on acid. But I think that, like, I don't know, I think maybe they could bring out the best in each other and help each other's careers and lives.
Yeah. Leaving aside his politics, I like the cut of his jib. I think he's like kind of like he could be like a character in like Pride and Prejudice.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I like him not in a political space. I just
Yeah.
think he's too. But and women find him attractive. He's not my type at all. My type is like Rip from Yellowstone. So like the total opposite. But women do find him very attractive and she's
See,
obviously stunning.
he's
So
too like intellectual and fey for you. Why don't you like him?
I just always liked guys that look like lumberjacks. Look at my
Yeah.
husband. Like
Yeah.
a guy who can chop wood. And I
Yeah.
think I would have to chop wood if I was dating Justin Trudeau. So
If your husband wrestled Justin Trudeau, I know I bet on. Ben would whoop him. He'd just whoop him.
I
Um,
mean, yes. Ben's an
uh,
enormous man though, too. Like I think he could kill almost anyone. So
all
anyway.
right, we'll keep tracking that, and I'm again, you and I as our special project, we need to go to the wedding, and our spouses can stay home if we only get one invite. But I really want to go to that wedding. Can you imagine the guest list for that wedding? Because they both are like super connected.
Yeah, and like they're both icons in their own right for different reasons, but I'm glad you're as invested in this. And on some of my chat chains with my girlfriends, people are like, "What do you think of this?" And I was like, "I love it. I actually think this is like fantastic for a lot of different reasons."
My psychic connection to you is such as my third thought when I saw the photos of them at dinner was, I need to talk to Meghan about this. And I'm so delighted we're on the same page. All right, we'll continue to obsessively track that. Let's talk now about this Sydney Sweeney thing. I heard you talk about it on Citizen McCain, and I didn't totally understand your position. And of course, this story changes every second. So maybe you've got a new position. I think it's the most unoriginal ad ever. That's my biggest complaint about it. Like the jeans pun, it's been done and it's not particularly clever, interesting. What amazing to me is, as far as I know, the jeans company hasn't said a word about it. So my question to you is, do you agree with those who say they knew exactly what they were doing, or this is snuck up on them and they had no idea?
I believe they did come out with a statement, but correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, defending her and saying it's just like an online controversy and 72% of their clientele, which by the way, I'm their clientele. I love A&E clothes. Like they're fantastic.
When did that come out? Last I looked at, was that new or I missed it?
I mean, maybe it's fake news, but I saw it on
Yeah.
Twitter like 15 minutes ago. But
Oh, okay. All right. Well, 15 minutes ago, it makes sense. I've been
I'm
busy.
spreading
We'll
fake
look
news.
for
I
it.
apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. But do you think they knew what they were doing? Like
Yes.
when I go back and look at it, because it's so clumsy and over the top, I'm now suspicious that of course they knew. This was like a brilliant way to lure a bunch of attention to the company.
Yeah, I think they knew what they were doing. You don't hire giant marketing companies who haven't researched things within an inch of their life. I just know from my work in corporate America, whenever there's an ad for anything, I remember I had to interview Chuck E. Cheese one time, and his real name is Chester Entertainment Cheese, and they were like very specific about how to interview Chuck E. Cheese. So like, and that's just
what show was that? What show was that for?
They had like Chuck E. Cheese had like sponsored a show or something. I remember.
You had Chester right in the studio.
Yeah, and I have a picture with him, and it was great. It was like, and I was all for it. Like
now, was it the real Chester, or just like there's 7 guys who wear the costume?
I think it's just like someone in a costume, but
right.
But I'm just saying there was a lot of like instructions about like what to, and that's a small thing. So I do think the advertising company knew exactly what they were doing. Sydney Sweeney is in every ad ever. She has like Baskin Robbins and Ware Lane and all these like cosmetic ads, and then she did this like weird bath bomb where it's like bath water that she had been in. It sounds a little pervy, and then like people could buy it and like take a bath in her old bath water. It sounds kind of gross. So she's doing tons of ads. I like Sydney Sweeney. I think she's like a throwback to like a Pamela Anderson rock star girlfriend time. I didn't love the ad because I too thought it was unoriginal, and I also just don't like, and this like surprises everyone, I don't like conversations about genetics. Like I just think it's like it's like icky for some reason. And yes, like women, of course, she's like stunningly gorgeous and whatever, but I don't know. As someone who like,
but this is, sorry to interrupt, but this is exactly what you said the other day that I didn't, I was surprised to hear you say it. It's not like some racial conversation. I mean, let's just go, as your father would say, to straight talk. You are a gorgeous maverick. You have a parent who's gorgeous, and your father was a maverick. Like that's genetics. There's nothing wrong with that.
But like, there's nothing wrong with that, and thank you. But I feel like a middle-aged old now. But thank you. I think it's just that like, I'm also not a skinny woman, and I've done a lot of work for everything that's ever written about me. It's always, oh, she's not skinny. She's not skinny since the beginning of my career. And there was such a push for like body inclusivity. And I actually really liked it. Like I like ads with different kinds of women
Yeah.
everywhere. And in the ad, she's saying like my hair, my whatever. And I get it. Like there's always going to be a space for like a blonde, buxom, like hot lady. Always. It's like American men love that. That's fine. But
Well,
I find
Italian and German men love it too.
yeah, all men love men and all men everywhere love it, and it's great. But I just think, like, I don't know, you could have had some other women in the ad, but this didn't make me upset. I wasn't angry. Had someone not brought it to my attention, I wouldn't have cared. Had I watched the ad, I wouldn't have cared. But like, if I'm having an opinion, I just don't love conversations about like genetics in general. But
I still don't understand why not. Like, are you going to keep your kids out of biology class?
no, but like you said, you're bringing up my parents, but I also have an adopted sister. And, she's, when we're talking about like genetics, she's like exactly like fits into my family personality wise. And it's a great like nature versus nurture conversation.
100%. There's nature versus nurture is one of the most fascinating things in the world. I couldn't agree more. But part of that is nature. I don't want to spend our whole time on this, but I want to get you over your aversion to genetics.
No, it's just that they're saying the only ideal beauty is Sydney Sweeney. And I think there's lots of beautiful.
I agree with that, but I don't think they were saying that. Maybe I'm wrong. All right.
Everyone's going to come after me and be like, you're so woke, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not. I also just like didn't like the ad. Like, I agree with you. Like, I just didn't like it. Like, had I been in charge, I would have been like, we have a lot more ways to make this. If you want a sexy jeans ad, hire Mark and Meghan. I will help.
You and I wouldn't even need to use ChatGPT. We'd have 7 sexy jeans ads way better than that. All right. Let's talk about Cory Booker, our long-running lack of understanding of what the Democratic Party's doing. He was upset about some of his Democratic colleagues being too accommodating to President Trump's agenda. Here is Cory Booker, some would say losing his mind on the Senate floor.
That's why I'm standing here. Don't question my integrity. Don't question my motives. I'm standing for Jersey. I am standing for my police officers. I'm standing for the Constitution, and I'm standing for what's right. And dear God, if you want to come at me that way, you're going to have to take it up with me, because there's too much on the line right now in America. As people's due process rights and freedom of the speech rights and secret police are running around this country, picking people up off the streets who have a legal right to be here. There's too much going on.
Now, he's run for president before. He's not talked about much. Earlier in the program, I talked about my invisible primary rankings for potential 2028 candidates. And last night with Bret Baier, I suggested a potential motive for that performance.
Mark, 10 seconds. Cory Booker seems like he's volume-wise in the race, but there are others.
There are a lot of primaries within the primary to win the Democratic nomination. Cory Booker's the front runner for the MSNBC primary. I'm not sure that's the most important one, but he did himself a lot of good there.
There you go.
All right. I like to quote myself. So the MSNBC primary, not nothing. You and I used to hang out at MSNBC. What is Cory Booker up to?
Worst job I ever had, by the way, which was short-lived, but whatever.
Is he just trying to get a better slot on Maddow, or like what's that? What do you think's up with that?
So I have, first and foremost, I have a theory that I'm going to stand with forever, that there are too many failed actors and theater kids in politics in general, in political commentary, in politics, everywhere. I hate it. If you went to like Tisch School of the Arts and your dream was to be like a rock star or an actor, I hate that politics is your like second choice and you like somehow made it. Cory Booker is always auditioning to be in Hamilton. Like he's always auditioning. He is like, he looks like he's
but then he should talk less and smile more if he wants to be in Hamilton.
Yes, and whatever. But I don't know if you've met Cory Booker. I met Cory Booker privately and professionally and respectfully. I have no idea how this man became senator. I found him like dull and saccharine in a way. And keep in mind, like the politicians I'm attracted to are very different than him, like in a lot of ways. But I think that he's old news. I think he's boring. I think that he is someone who has really like lost his moment and he's trying to regain it by pulling stunts. And like you say, it'll go great on Jen Psaki's show, but for normal voters who are like sitting, at a town hall, they're probably like, why are you yelling? Like, why are you like, what is happening? And also this is very unpopular hot take. Okay, Mark. So, but I can say this to you.
I'm braced for it.
I'm not going to vote for someone who's single for president. You need to have a partner. I don't care if it's a husband or a wife or a long-term person. You cannot be single. I need a first lady.
Yeah.
I need a man. You're an attractive senator. Figure it out.
Is he no longer dating that actress?
No, and who doesn't make it work with Rosario Dawson? Again, one of the most gorgeous, intelligent.
I thought it was Rosario Dawson, but I didn't want to say it and be wrong. But did they officially break up? Like, I don't remember the breakup. What happened? How long ago did it happen?
I think like right after he dropped out for president. But
Yeesh. Do you want to speculate as to the timing on that or no?
I believe it was like not that long after. And again, I only know what I like read in like gossip sense, but you know, she's like, I think when again, I've had the privilege of meeting her and she's like highly intelligent, gorgeous. Like, she's not good enough. Like he's going to kill him. Like,
is she smarter than Katy Perry?
I have not talked politics with Katy Perry, but I found Rosario, like most actors, I think are, pretty stupid.
The thing about Cory Booker, I know you think he's boring and I secretly share your point of view, but I would never say that in public. The thing about Cory Booker is when he was the mayor, he was mayor of Newark, right? He was mayor in New Jersey of Newark. And he would come across the river and hang out with Democratic donors and they loved him. He was touted the way Bill Clinton was, the way Barack Obama was. They loved him. It was like, I've seen the future, not the future of the Democratic Party. I've seen the future of America, and it is Cory Booker. And I can't tell you the number of people who said, you must meet him. You must spend time with him. They raised money for him, including some independents and Republicans who thought he was incredible. And when I finally met him, and this was during his it candidate phase, I felt the same way you did. And again, I don't hate boring people. I don't feel negatively towards boring people, except if I have to have them be president or sit next to them at a dinner party. I don't get how he convinced them all that he was so fascinating.
Yeah, and again, it's not, I'm being very hard on him, but I just think, like, I find him ridiculous for the clips you just show. Like, I just don't take that seriously. And I think, like you said, he's someone that like a donor would like. I think someone in Manhattan would like them, but we are in an era of really raw, uncensored politics. And the people who are getting attention and who have a huge following are people who are who they are have no problem, like, saying things that are controversial, saying things that are unpopular. And to me, he just feels really focus grouped. Like he probably like reads poetry in his spare time. Like nothing about it is I think the tone of where the country's at. And he, I'm sure, is smart enough to understand that as well. But I apologize. I really find him quite boring. And unless he does things like this, and then, we talk about it, but this is not, he clearly wants to run for president again, but to get like 2% in Iowa? Like there's some people I just don't understand why.
Can we give him points for passion? Can we give him points for saying like, he's not just, getting along to go along, going along to get along. He's out there saying like Trump's ruining America, and somebody needs to say it. Can we give him points for that or no?
Because he rehearsed it in his bathroom mirror before. Like it's authentic. It's not. I love passion. I love when people pop off. I love when politicians break.
But you just think this is all play acting.
Yes, it seems like. Remember when he said like I am Spartacus before, and it was clearly also. He seems uncomfortable in himself, I guess, if that makes sense. Right. I don't know. But do you think that he has a chance of being president?
Not a very good one. I'm a believer, and again, your dad was testament to this. You can run once and lose, and run again and get the nomination, and sometimes win the presidency. Like that happens. But people say, well, they ran one time and they lost, but they could come back. I think there's some people who can, and some people who can't. In other words, some people's losses are so obviously a problem. Your dad lost to a massive front runner, just like just a battleship, and he almost beat him. And then he came back to be the nominee. And then unfortunately, he had to run the general election against the sun rising.
The saint of everything.
But also in the interim, he was the most popular politician in America for 8 years. Same with Hillary Clinton. Same with Bob Dole. Like. There are people who run and lose, and you see the reason why they could win. I don't see anything in his first effort that makes me think, he just kind of had some bad luck. He needs to learn some lessons. So I don't think so, but maybe. I don't know.
I remember one of the questions I asked him when I interviewed him was, what does a vegan eat at the Iowa State Fair? And I don't even remember his answer because
tofu on a stick.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm sure he's a nice man. I'm sure he's like, whatever. It's just not my kind of politics and not my kind of politician at all.
All right. In my reported monologue, I talked about my invisible primary rankings and about, who seems to be doing good in certain doing well in certain categories. In the current universe of people, who seems to you to be doing well, not to win the presidency necessarily, but to win the Democratic nomination? Who's like right now you're thinking, yeah, that person's got it going on, if anybody?
I mean, they are all so, so far, so like, I don't know, toothless. People in my life that I really respect who are more moderate really are trying to push Andy Bashir on me, saying like, he's a governor that won Kentucky, whatever. But I think with the rise of Mamdani and the rise of this like extreme pro-Palestine stance on the left, including like you see the Pod Save America bros saying this has to be the platform of the party, I genuinely don't know how the party reconciles that, because there's still a lot of center left Democrats that are not going to be comfortable voting for a socialist, voting for anyone who's like flirting with socialism. But I don't think that a moderate candidate could get out of a primary. So I actually see, if I had to predict today, and granted, many things can happen in the 3 years until this happens, I think they go with a wildly progressive candidate and then get their ass handed to them. That's what I think.
All right. What's going on? Switching topics now.
You're a journalist. Huh? I'm just a hack commentator.
Nah, I mean, I think it's a very weak field. And people who push somebody like Andy Bashir, when people say that to me, I say, tell me what you know about him that makes you think he can win 270 electoral votes. Just give me the best stuff. And all they say is he's a Democrat who won in Kentucky. But that's not sufficient. That's just not sufficient to me. So I think at a minimum, they should learn more.
It's not Mayor Pete. And I need people to stop saying that to me, because you are not based in any kind of reality if you're saying Mayor Pete's going to be president.
Well, different being president. I'm just focused on who the nominee is going to be. And I think he could be the nominee.
Mayor Pete?
Yeah, it's a weak field.
JD Vance will beat him like
again, that's a different question, who's going to win the general. But it's a weak field. Someone has to win. It'd be like saying, here's a bunch of uncoordinated second graders having a foot race, slow, uncoordinated second graders. Someone will win the race. May not be in a record time, but someone's going to win the race. All right, switching topics to your friend Tulsi Gabbard, much in the news these days. How's she doing? And do you understand what she's doing regarding Barack Obama? Do you have a good beat on that?
We had dinner last week, and one of the things I think Tulsi and I bond over is when we're off, we just want to be off and don't talk about politics. So actually, we didn't talk about that. We talked about a lot of other things, and I just texted with her actually right before you came on. I think she's trying to expose the deep state. I think she's trying to expose corruption. When that report came out, I wasn't shocked, but it's still really, jarring to have things confirmed that you has sort of been like theorized in the deep parts of the internet. I think what's fascinating for me, and obviously I'm wildly biased on my dislike.
Yeah, she's one of your closest friends. We make that clear.
Oh, no, not just with her. I mean, with her as well. She is one of my closest friends, but with President Obama, seeing his downfall and Michelle Obama's downfall, at least not from, there was a point in time when they were basically like saints, like living us, has been really fascinating. And I'm curious to see how they end up like handling all of this. And what's interesting, his statement, he didn't deny it. Like, he didn't deny the accusations. He just came out saying that, like, these are things that have already been investigated.
Right.
What's your
well, I don't know what to think about it. I haven't talked much about it on two-way, and people have really criticized me for it. And they say, you got to take the story more seriously. So I do take it seriously because I do believe in the deep state, maybe not defined exactly the way other people do. And I do think that some of the people who Tulsi Gabbard has identified as being part of an alleged conspiracy have a history of misusing intelligence and telling lies about Donald Trump. So I don't think you can just dismiss out of hand that they may have done more of that than we already know about. But I don't know what to make of it. I just want to ask you one more question about her. Again, she's your friend, so you can say pass if you don't want to answer. How would you appraise the accusation that she was on the outs with the president and she's doing this to get back in his good graces?
It's such bullshit. And if you know her at all, she doesn't care about being popular. Like, it's one of the things that she and I really bonded over is like, neither of us need to be loved, which is like, I think kind of unusual for women in any position in politics or like media of any kind. And she doesn't care. And I think the idea, I also know that like, and then again, I don't want to reveal like too much of our private conversations, but I know that there was actually never a rift with her and President Trump, and President Trump is actually very fond of her both personally and professionally, and her husband. So I never believed that. I actually think there's a bunch of people in DC who are extremely threatened by her power, by her ranking in the government right now, by how much influence she has, by the fact that like she could very well be a presidential candidate in 2028. I think there's a lot of people that really want to take her out and are gunning for her. And I think she's aware of that. And I think there was a lot of nasty press leaks that were pretty much baseless. And I thought that was an extremely out of line question that Caitlin Collins asked. And I thought was really disrespectful. And I made that very clear on social media. And people can continue to underestimate Tulsi at their own risk. I've been like friends with her for like, it's like, God, 8 to 10 years now. And like I said, I just had dinner with her, and people go crazy for her. They are very excited to see her, come up to her, very emotional, very intense. It's not like, you know, I have other friends who are politicians, and respectfully, they just don't have the same kind of emotional reaction when people around them. Like, and so I think people are underestimating her at their own risk.
Yeah. She has the gasp factor. I've not been around her, of course, nearly as much as you, but when people stumble upon her, like in a restaurant or something, they gasp. And that's, that's an unusual reaction. All right. Lastly, because we're running down.
She looks like she's an X-Men with her hair. And
she's a badass.
Yeah.
All right. Lastly, if you could interview President Trump today and ask him one question about the Jeffrey Epstein matter, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. What would I ask President Trump about Jeffrey Epstein? Do you think he killed himself?
Interesting.
And I would also like, is there something that you could release that you haven't released? Like, because that's the thing I don't really understand, because they said that they were going to release files, and then now they don't exist, or it was overplayed. I find this whole story very confusing. Like everything keeps changing. And then all the stuff with his press conference day before yesterday, where he was like, actually, Virginia Giuffre was an employee of mine. Like, I did not know that. I did not know that she worked at his spa. Like, it's very confusing. And anytime people bring up Epstein and Trump, which is, that's fine. Everyone has a right to do that. It's also interesting to me that like Ghislaine, I always say her name wrong, Ghislaine Maxwell, was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding and is literally visible in the photos when she's saying her vows with her husband. Like, respectfully, there's no one that came to my wedding that like in any way I'm embarrassed of the world knowing about. And like, I'm just fascinated that like the Clintons clearly had that intimate of a relationship with her and him. So I don't know if we're ever going to get to the answer of Epstein, but people are not letting it go.
Kind of an incredible story. So we started talking about weddings, at least a hypothetical wedding between Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry, and they're
going to get married. They're going to get
Chelsea's wedding. I think they're going to get married too. You think it'll be in the U.S. or Canada?
No, it will not be in the U.S. And I don't know. No, I don't think. I think she's like over it. She's got a lot of bad press here, but I think they're going to go the whole way. I really do. You and I were predicting it first. I think they're going to go the distance.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I look forward to watching their relationship blossom and bloom. And I look forward to one of us getting a wedding invite and
it's not me.
Pinky promise that we'll go together. Meghan's program, Citizen McCain, appears live, and you can participate in the two-way conversation every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. And then if you happen to miss it live, you can still watch it on demand on YouTube. Meghan, thank you. Love having you on.
I love talking to you, but when are you ever not on camera? Like, I can't imagine how much I was like, do you ever eat? Do you ever like take a break? You're always on it.
I've got a bacon IV drip.
Putting
pork product right into my veins.
I saw you on Fox last night, and I was like, Mark is never taking a break. He's just always on camera. Gotta
improve, and the only way to improve is to keep doing it.
That's
Meghan, grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we're going to check in with my friend David Bonson to figure out what's happening next up on the economy. Stay with us. Ever since Donald Trump was sworn in for this term, his administration has moved very fast and gotten quite a bit done. But while they're moving mountains for their cause, they can't manage your personal savings. That, of course, is up to you. One of the smartest ways to protect your financial future is through diversification, especially with gold from my trusted friends at Birch Gold Group. Take the last 12 months, gold's value has jumped 40%. Central banks are now buying it at record levels. Global instability is at its highest in decades, which makes Birch Gold And owning Birch Gold, physical gold, incredibly easy and incredibly important. You can convert an existing IRA or a 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA backed by physical gold. Your other option is simply to buy gold and store it securely in your home safe. So right now, just text NEXT to the number 989898, and Birch Gold will go ahead and send you a free info kit about gold. There's no obligation, just some useful information. They've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers. You can join those folks and take control of your savings today. Again, text the word NEXT to 989898. All right, next up, the mystery and riddle of the American economy. You look at all the public data. There's things that are good and things that are bad. You talk to experts, you'll hear people who are bullish and people who are bearish. And there's a lot of cross currents, a lot of confusion, in part because of the unprecedented policies of this administration. Here's how the Wall Street Journal framed it on Thursday. There are two economic worlds the U.S. could be living in right now. And Fed officials might not know which one it is for months. In one, economic weakness that's been lurking beneath reasonably solid headlines. Headline numbers finally surface. In the other, artificial intelligence investment and buoyant household wealth power the economy past trade war headwinds. Those are pretty big disparities. So to try to figure out which it is or which it may be, eventually joining me now, my friend David Bahnsen, Chief Investment Officer of the Bahnsen Group. David, welcome in.
Thank you, Mark.
So you and I talk about this stuff a fair amount. Just in general, which of the two camps do you lead to, or is it impossible to say? Or are things going really well, or are we on the precipice of peril?
Yes. This is the problem, and it's very often the case that there is mixed economic data. As an overall trend, the economic data is more good than it is bad. Now, of course, many people would say that's generally an argument to not be cutting rates, particularly when the call is for really severe and draconian rate cuts down to like a 1% Fed funds rate. That's the type of thing you normally be doing in an extreme recession. And in fact, the only time we've ever done it was in the aftermath of COVID, in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. So there is a little bit of disconnect, not only in the data, not only in the media narratives that you're talking about. There's a heavy politicization of the way people are thinking about the economy, and I try my best not to do that. But there's also a disconnect even in the internal administration message that all at once things are the best they've ever been, and we desperately need a recessionary level of rate cuts. And so there's a lot of confusion out there.
Yeah, and well said, and of course highlighting the administration's point of view. You wouldn't be celebrating rapid economic growth and calling for a rate cut unless you had a different economic textbook than the ones we grew up with. Let's talk about the GDP number, because it's a great example. The headline number was very good, but it didn't take a PhD in economics to look under the hood and see that the reason that the growth was 3% was because of other data that's not positive. What's that data, and how troubling is the other data?
Yeah, it's amazing how easy it would have been to unpack the data. Even if there was no such thing as ChatGPT, the old days of Google.com would have worked just fine to show that essentially there are four ingredients marked to the GDP formula, always and forever. Consumption, and I'll simplify the labels: consumption, production, inventory, government spending, and trade. The trade issue.
All right, that sounded like five.
Well, I'm including the inventory and net exports as together. There's a sort of subcategory. The supply siders like myself are ones who believe economic growth starts with production. And so that's generally in the GDP formula, it's referred to as non-residential fixed investment. It's business investment. And that is the category I care about most. But the entire formula is capturing the ability to measure total goods and services in the economy.
Right. So let's talk about that one for a second. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
So there's the economic conditions in a country that including interest rates, that say how likely is it for people to make new investment, right? Then there's the psychology, there's the animal spirits, and so people look to Washington and they say, are taxes going to go down? Is there going to be stability in international trade? they did cut taxes, but obviously instability may be holding people back. In general, under Donald Trump so far, not just this one quarter, how are people feeling about new investment? Are people feeling conditions are good for new investment, or they feel they need to hold back because of uncertainty or other elements in the economy?
Well, in Trump 1.0, in the first term, they were very, very high. It was the only period that we got above trendline growth since financial crisis. And I believe that that was directly related to the 2017 tax cut, the significant lowering of the corporate tax rate, other deregulation and energy endeavors. There was some high correlation to Trump policy then. A lot of that reversed in some of the trade volatility of 2018, and 2019 was a very strong year. But then 2020 changes things because of COVID, and the recovery from COVID changed things thereafter, after the first term ended. The issue now, to answer your question, is that when he was elected, small business confidence and CEO confidence exploded, and then they have since dramatically declined. But I'm not one who believes confidence is what ultimately drives things, and the GDP number doesn't measure confidence either. It measures actual activity, and that's where it's a lot harder to kind of fudge the numbers on real life investment, real life activity that shows in the metrics. The thing that is skewed the numbers here, a negative 0.5% in Q1, and that's annualized, and a 3% for Q2, which is annualized. So these blend together. Year to date, our annualized economic growth number is 1.25%. It's very muted.
Very muted. But just go back to the conditions. All the things you listed, trying to lower energy prices, improve exploration and distribution and export, lower regulation, lower taxes. All those things are, for Scott Bessent and the president, they're front and center still. That's at least their goal, to have those things contribute to the ability of American investors to invest and for big companies, small companies to feel confident. Clearly, that's being offset now for some by the tariff uncertainty and perhaps by things like the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In general, would you, projecting forward through Q3 and 4, do you think the people, despite the uncertainty from tariffs, are ready to invest robustly?
Not robustly, but I believe that we're getting to a point of much more clarity, and that even if there are going to be certain headwinds around the real cost of certain tariffs, those that find themselves in the unlucky position of not getting waivers, exemptions, and being in a certain sector or geography that really is hit harder than others, I still think they're better off with clarity, even if it's clarity of bad news, than confusion around potential good news. No news makes it very difficult to do economic calculation.
Is anything but the tariffs causing that uncertainty?
Tariff adjacent issues, like then what total trade will end up being and what it will do to industrial production, to durable goods orders, and then ultimately to the total level of trade affects total level of capital flows. Right. And this is a significant issue that won't be visible in the next Q3, Q4. I'm really looking out, Mark, a whole year, because I think that you're going to get a much better indicator of where some of the bad things did or didn't happen and some of the good things did or didn't happen. But if you have a significant drop in foreign investment, then that becomes a different sort of problem. But this is, I think, the most important thing I'll probably say here in our limited time is that the Bessent priority or agenda around their tariff and trade policy is a totally different list than the prior list, which was, I'm calling the Navarro list. President Trump has his fingerprints on both lists, obviously, but what they're not talking about as much now is the desperate need to lower the trade deficit, which I think is a fictitious economic goal, and protectionist-oriented things to try to go lend a boost to one sector over another. That's still going to be out there politically, but what you see now is Bessent talking about opening up new markets and foreign investment. So those are two new things that could be bullish.
Right. So it's a trade agenda associated with tariffs, but it's much more palatable and encouraging to the business community than the prior orientation. Right.
Much more. And for good reason.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about consumers. We've got 4 big spending moments coming up in the balance of 2025. Back to school. We're right on the doorstep of that. Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Are you bullish on those 4 moments for consumer spending?
Well, I assume you mean bullish, as I would believe consumer spending is supposed to always be a really good thing.
Well, we need at least some of it.
Yeah, my answer right now is yes. My answer in a month will be yes. And my answer in any period for the rest of our lives where Americans have not lost credit, the answer is yes. The American consumer does not stop spending over animal spirits or over fear of attacks. They only stop spending when they run out of credit.
Right. Okay. The Trump administration cannot be considered an economic success, in my view, unless they find a way to address 2 big areas of concern for America's families. One is the cost of housing, and other is the cost of education and college. What is the administration doing that you see that at least potentially could address those things by the end of this term?
You know, it's really a great question, because I would have said to you that there is very little the federal government can do other than try to jawbone the Fed for a lower Fed funds rate, which even that doesn't do a lot for the longer term mortgage rates, which are much more tethered to the 10-year and the 30-year than the overnight lending rate. But, you know, when President Trump starts talking about getting rid of capital gain on primary residence, you know, there are, or adjusting for inflation, some of the capital gain burdens, there are things on the margin. The privatization of Fannie and Freddie could be a huge thing, and people say, no, it could take away credit. I vehemently disagree. I think that there is a huge opportunity in capital markets to get Fannie Freddie out of this insane stewardship that it's now been in for 17 years.
But they're not going to do that before the midterms.
Not the midterms. It would be second half of this term, right? Yeah. But I think that most of what you bring up on housing is really a state and local issue, and that's probably the best that the federal government, the Trump administration, can hope for, is to be lucky with the timing of some of these things improving. But they can try to use bully pulpit to demand more zoning relief and more deregulation that will promote the supply of new housing stock.
Okay, just a couple minutes left. You're more of a free market, traditional, conservative economic orientation than the president has, certainly on tariffs. With the exception of tariffs, for people from your classical economic point of view, from the center right, is Donald Trump a good president in this term, taking the tariffs aside?
Certainly, because his instinct, when you take the tariff and trade issue aside, which comes from a very authentic impulse he has that America's constantly getting taken advantage of. If you put that issue aside, I'm firmly convinced that his natural instinct is supply side oriented. I don't think it's from reading volumes of Robert Mundell or Art Laffer. I think his instinct is supply oriented, which is deregulation, energy independence, and removing marginal tax burdens to incentivize production. So I believe that the president in that sense is very Reaganite, and the trade and tariff issue is where there's sort of a good cop, bad cop on each of his shoulders from the vantage point of this traditional conservative.
All right, lastly, 2 Fed questions just for the fun of it. Will Chairman Powell serve out his full term, and who will be the next chair of the Fed?
The Chairman Powell will serve out the rest of his term, and the next chairman of the Fed will be Kevin Warsh, but I wouldn't even put 50% odds on that. There's 3 or 4 people that I think are all between 20 and 40% each of odds, and the president does not know who he will appoint right now.
It's one of those questions I love when people ask me who will be chosen or what will happen, and I say, Donald Trump doesn't know, so how could I be expected to know?
That's right.
All right. David Bahnsen, Chief Investment Officer of the Bahnsen Group. David, always love talking economy with you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mark.
All right. That's it for today's program. We'll be back on Tuesday with a brand new summary episode. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe and download all our episodes. Next up, wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us on YouTube. If you stay in touch with us, you will always know what's next up.